I would like to remind you that for more Microsoft webcasts, you can go to Microsoft.com/webcasts. Thanks again for joining us for today's presentation, TechNet Webcast, PowerShell Essentials for the Busy Admin, Part 5 of 5. More than remotely possible using Windows PowerShell to manage the remote desktop. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Ed Wilson. Ed, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Marty. Hello, everybody. This is Ed Wilson. I'm the Microsoft scripting guy. And today we are looking at the last part of our 5-part series, PowerShell Essentials for the Busy Admin. More than remotely possible. So we're going to look at using Windows PowerShell to remotely manage the remote desktop. Now, I say remote desktop here. It can be a Windows 7 machine. It can be XP machine. It can be Windows 8 client. It can be Windows 8 server. It can be 2008 R2 Core Edition. It doesn't matter as long as we've got PowerShell, at least version 2.0, installed on our remote machines. In addition, we generally want to enable PowerShell remoting, because once we enable PowerShell remoting, then we can use the WinRM protocol to be able to talk to these remote machines. The nice thing about this is a single port. It is configurable, and it is designed to allow us to do the remote management. If we do not enable PowerShell remoting, then there are still ways that we can talk to remote machines, but there's some issues with that. We may need to open up ports. Actually, we will need to open up ports on anything past Windows XP with Service Pack 2. When we have our the Windows firewall there, we'll need to open up ports to enable us to do that. There could be credential issues, a whole number of things that begin to get involved. So it's certainly easiest to enable PowerShell remoting. For the demos today, I'll be working from my Windows 7 desktop, which is running Windows 7, with the Service Pack 1. It's 64-bit mode, and so actually my version of PowerShell that I'm starting up is a 64-bit version of PowerShell. During the demos, I will be talking at least to 2 different domain controllers. One is DC3, which is a 2008 R2 domain controller. It's 64-bit, obviously. Matter of fact, that's running in a virtual node on a Hyper-V box. We'll also be talking to DC1, which is a 2008 domain controller, and that's running on a 32-bit version of a computer. Matter of fact, it is a physical machine. At some point in time, we may talk to SQL1, which is a 64-bit physical machine, also running 2008 R2. So we've got different machines that we'll be talking to, and they are various versions of the operating system, and some are 32-bit and some are 64-bit mode. The thing is that I can use PowerShell from my computer to talk to these different machines. Now, along the way, I'm also going to look at some other things. We're going to look at the different ways that we can talk to these different machines, and we will look at some of the problems that may be inherent in each of these. So with that in mind, let's get started. So there are a number of commandlets in PowerShell 2 where we added a computer name parameter. And these look like a really, really good way to begin to talk to remote machines. For instance, we have, let's take a look at help, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my PowerShell console now. And we'll just go ahead and get started there. So I'm going to click, come down to PowerShell Console. 3, 2, 1. Okay, we are now sharing out the PowerShell Console. And so I'm going to come over and click on it. So for instance, if I look at help on Get Service, it comes back and it shows me that I have a computer name parameter, and then it accepts a string. That string has square brackets after it, which means that it will accept an array of computer names. So that is Get Service. And we look at that and we go, cool. I can use this to connect to remote machines to get service, to get remote service information. And we can come over here and use Get Process. and we see the same thing. There's a computer name parameter, and it accepts a string. That string is an array. Now, if I want to find out all of these, then I can use a command, use get command, and I'm going to specify that I'm interested in command type of commandlet. I'm going to pipe this to a where object, and I'm going to look for the definition that will match the word computer name. This allows me to find commands that have this in the definition. We were looking at the definition earlier, and we've seen that there was a computer name parameter. Now, to make this output decent for us to look at, I'm going to set this to format wide. And I'm going to choose the property name. So this will be the name of the commandlet, and I'm going to auto-size it. Now, this is kind of a command that you're not going to necessarily need to use all that often, if ever. The slide that you see in the slide deck, this is how I got that content. I typed this command, and then I cut and pasted it into my PowerPoint slide deck so that it gives me the nice wide listing of all the commandlets that use the parameter computer name. And so we see that we got some event log stuff, get hotfix, get service, there's set service. Now the nice thing about set service is I can use this to change a service from automatic to manual or disabled. We have get process, which will give me process information. Stop computer. I use stop computer on a regular basis. I've written a scripted guide article about this, and see, I live down in North Carolina. We get a lot of thunderstorms in the summer in particular. And quite often the power goes out during these thunderstorms. So I actually wrote a Hey Scripted Guy article where I talk about reading the contents of a text file that has the name of every computer on my network. And then I just simply use this one-line command to stop all these computers. And so this is a very, very handy commandlet to use. And in particular, to be able to shut these things down. And we've got some others here. Get WMyObject is a little different. And we got Restart Computer. I talked about using Restart Computer recently in a Scripted Guy article where I was talking about adding a computer to the domain and then being able to change its name, to rename that computer, and to restart the computer. And I talked about using this commandlet there. Test connection is kind of about like ping, only a little bit different. Those are some of the main ones. Now, in addition, I'm going to show you some other stuff. But let's go back to get service and get process. So, as I mentioned the other day, my PowerShell console right now is running as a normal person. I do not have admin rights. So if I type get service on my local computer and press enter, actually let's make this output a little bit easier to read. We're going to choose bit service. That way I'm not going to be scrolling a long listing of stuff. So this is my bit service on this local machine. If I want to find out about it on a remote computer, so I can use computer name or I can use CN. CN is an alias for computer name parameter. I wrote a Scripted Guy blog article last year where I talked about finding all of these parameter aliases. It makes working from the command line a lot easier. So computer name of SQL1. Now I'm going to expect this command to fail, and the reason is that as a normal plain old user, I don't have rights on my remote computer. So let's type this on DC1, and we'll run this a little bit. It's waiting, it's thinking. Press enter a few times, it's still waiting and thinking. Still waiting and thinking. This makes demos exciting, doesn't it? There we go. And we're getting an error back from there as well. And then this error is a little misleading here, saying it can't find the service name bits. Let's get rid of that part and go for CNDC1. Yeah, see, now we're still getting this the different error, and this time it says the operation may require other privileges. So I don't have permission. This particular error was misleading, would make me think that I don't have the bit service even installed on that remote machine, which certainly isn't the case. And unfortunately, as we've seen earlier when I type help on get service, there is no credential parameter. And so if I've got this computer name parameter and I would like to be able to use it, then I'm going to have to be running the command with elevated rights, which means I'm going to have to be running the PowerShell console with elevated rights because I cannot specify alternate credentials using get service, get event log, and those kinds of things. Now I'm going to share out my entire desktop. So at this point in time, you should be seeing my entire desktop. I'll wait for it to paint just another second or two. Now, the easiest way to start PowerShell with advanced rights or admin rights is to right-click and from the on the PowerShell icon, and then from the task menu, I select Run as Administrator. When I do this, a dialog box pops up. Excuse me, and this dialog box is going to prompt me to type in admin rights. So I'm going to type in my administrator username. Give it credentials. And now the PowerShell window is running with admin rights. And now I can use get service to look for the service with the name of bits on my computer named SQL1. And I'm also going to specify DC1 as well. And when I press enter, then we should now come back with information from these two different computers that would let us know the status of the bits service on those two different computers. Hit enter a few times. La 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 la. Come on. There we go. Okay, so it found it on one of the computers. We didn't find it on the other one, and that was what was timing out there. Let's go back to DC1. That's the one that it found it on. We did not find it on SQL1. Oh, there it is. That was weird. Okay. So there it is on SQL1, and there it is on DC1. I wonder, that should have worked like that. I don't know why it was acting strange, because that commandlet does accept an array there, and I shouldn't have to put it in quotation marks. Okay, that's strange. Okay. Anyway, so this is how we can use get service then to connect to a remote computer and pull in this information from these. But that's kind of a bit inconvenient in doing that. So one of the things that I like to do then, instead of using this type of a technique, is I like to use Invoke command or something like that. Now, so the next slide in the slide deck, if we take a look at that, is just continuing to talk about what we were looking at earlier. So we can use these commandlets to get information from remote computers, assuming that we have rights. So I can use get service, get process, I can use get hotfix, and there's other commandlets there that we can use as well to pull in the remote types of information. Working with services, I can, as I did mention, that I can use get service and set service to work with a remote computer, assuming that we've got rights on that. But there are no computer name parameter for start service, stop service, restart, resume, and suspend service. So let me actually kind of demo working with these. And to do this, I'm going to use Invoke command. So I'm going to share back out my PowerShell console. And this is the non-admin console because I closed the console that had admin rights. I'm going to clear this screen. And so I'm going to use invoke command first of all. So I could say invoke command. Before I do that, I'm going to store my credentials in a variable. And it prompts me to type in my password. At this point, then I now have a credential object, and it makes it easier for working against remote machines. So I'm going to say invoke command, and then I'm going to specify the credentials as $CRED and specify the computer name. And this time I'm just going to do this against DC1. And the curly brackets is where I put my actual command itself. So we'll start off with get service and bits, and then we'll close this. And when we do, then it goes over and it tells me that service is running. So I'm going to up arrow, and I'm going to stop that service. And now we're going to run the command to get the service and to find out the status on it. And we can see that that service is actually stopped. So this works pretty easy to be able to do this. So now I want to start that service, and I'm going to come over and say start the service, and that works. Now I'm going to go retrieve that, and we can see that the service is now running. So I'm going to do this against multiple computers. So we're going to do this against DC1 and DC3. So one is DC1 is 32-bit, DC3 is a 64-bit machine running 2008 R2. DC1 is running 2008. And so let's run this first of all against these two computers and see what happens. So on DC1, it says that the bit service is running, and it also tells me it's running on DC3 as well. So this is the nice thing about this output. From invoke command, we know immediately which computer is returning this information. So it makes it kind of nice. So now I'm going to stop it on both of these machines. So DC3, and so now I'm going to stop this service, the bit service on these two computers. Press enter, and it came back a lot faster that time. And so now I'm going to up arrow and get the status of the bit service on the two computers. We can see that it has in fact stopped on both of those machines. And to start it back up again, then I'm just going to come back over here and change this back to start and say groovy. And now let's verify that it started. And we can see that it is now, the bit service is now started back on these two computers. Now, as I showed you yesterday, I could easily read the contents of a text file and run this command against all of these different computers. So I'm going to use the cat command and get the contents of C:\FSO servers.txt. And it lists a number of computers, DC1, DC3, C:1, Exchange 1, and Hyper-V 1. And so I'm now going to use this command right here to get to populate the value of this variable. So I can just put parentheses. This will force this command to happen first. So I'm going to say cat C:\FSO servers.txt. I do not want to press tab here because that will erase the end of my line. In PowerShell 3, this doesn't take place, but in PowerShell 1 and 2, it does. It'll erase this. So we've changed this feature, if you will, in PowerShell 3's console, which is kind of nice. So now I know that one of these machines here, Hyper-V 1, I don't think I'm going to be able to get remote information from. So I would expect to see an error when I try to run this command against that particular machine. So I press enter. And so we're getting our the bit service is running on DC1 and DC3. It stopped on SQL 1 and Exchange 1, which is actually kind of interesting. And actually, I don't think I knew that. And so then we're timing out right now as we try to connect to Hyper-V 1. And press enter a few times, wait for a little bit, but eventually we will in fact see the error that says that we cannot connect to Hyper-V 1. Now the reason for that is simply for the fact that we can't make our connection. And I have not enabled remote remote protocol and remote PowerShell. I have not enabled that on Hyper-V 1. Now, if you're concerned about this and you're wanting to know, can I connect to this remote machine or not? Well, one of the easiest things to do is to use the test connection commandlet. And we're going to say computer name, Hyper-V. And so this will let me know if I can connect to this machine or not. And I'm cycling through some of the different parameters so that you can see what some of those different command line parameters are. So when I press enter then I would expect that my test connection command is actually going to come back and it's going to say, nope, you can't do this, it's not working because we can't make our connection there. And that is in fact the case. As a matter of fact, I hit this enter 3 or 4 times, and so we're getting several errors coming back there. So it's like, no way, you can't connect to this machine. All right, cool. So let's go back to to take a look at our slide deck, and then we will come back over here and get back to work. So working with services then, you can use get service, you can use set service to work with services. And set service, you can even change the running status, to set it from running to stopped. And so that allows you to work with those, but you can't use alternate credentials. You need to start PowerShell up with the credentials that have access to the remote machine. And in addition, you're going to have to open particular holes in the firewall. Using Invoke command, then I can specify alternate credentials. It only requires a single hole, which is the one that WinRM uses. And we have the enable PS remoting command, which will allow me to connect to those different machines. Working with processes is essentially the same thing. I can use get process, and get process then will allow me to work with different things. To get information from a remote computer. Start process, and start process does not have a computer name switch, and so therefore we cannot use these directly on remote machines. I can use Invoke command if I need to. So let's pop over to the console and take a look at that. So I'm going to go back to my Windows PowerShell console. I'm going to clear the screen, get rid of all these errors. So get process, works on my local machine. If I try to use it on a remote machine, say DC1, then I will in fact get an error. I don't need to reproduce that error, and because it just kind of gets a little cluttered up. Now I can use Invoke command. So I'm going to say Invoke command. And specify my computer name of DC1, and then I'm going to use get process here. So put this in my curly bracket, specify my credentials, and say okie dokie. This is the advantage of storing your credentials in a variable when you start your PowerShell session, because then I could just reuse this over and over and over again, and I don't have to stop and do different stuff. So we can see that we got back all of our process information. Now, as I showed you the other day, I can store this in a variable, and so now we've got this stored this in a variable, and now I can say $A, and we can sort the output here. We can look for the ones that are using the most CPU time, So I'm going to pipe this to a where object, $_.cpu. Let's just say it's greater than, let's say 10. And press enter. And so we found the processes that are on my remote server that are using the most CPU time. And so this works out pretty cool. If I don't want a specific number, then I can sort by CPU, and then I can select the first 10. And so now we find the 10 processes that are using the least amount of time. I could say show me the last. And now we found the ones that are using the most, so CPU time. So we can work with this, we can slice and dice it, do whatever we need to, and only run our command once in order to go and to get this information. Now, if I want to start a process on this remote computer, then I'm going to go back to Invoke command. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to say start. So I'm going to start the Notepad process on this remote machine. Now, I don't need to store this in a variable. I could, but I don't want to. And so we say okie dokie. Now I'm going to get the process so that I can find how many instances of Notepad are running on this remote machine. And that's actually kind of interesting. Can't find a process with the name of Notepad. Huh. I know we just started that. That's weird. That's really weird, actually. Start process Notepad. It should have started it. Oh, that's really, really strange. Okay. So, interesting. I'll run this on a different computer and see what happens here. So on DC3, that should start that up. And get this process on Notepad. That is definitely strange. It's not working. Weird. That should have worked. Okay. That's always makes demos fun, doesn't it? Okay, so that's working with processes on remote computers. And so let's go back to our slide deck. And so let's go to the next slide. So working with hotfixes. Now we have a command list that's called get hotfix that will allow me to find hotfixes on different machines. And we can even specify it by a particular ID. We can sort by description and stuff like this. So let's pop over to the back to the PowerShell Console and take a look at this. So I'm going to go back and share my PowerShell Console. Clear the screen. So on my first machine here, I could just type get hotfix and press enter, and it will give me a listing of all of the hotfixes that are installed on this computer. Now, this is actually pretty interesting because if we look at this, then it tells us a number of things. So we can find by description, and we can find updates or security updates or actual hotfixes themselves. We can find out who installed them, when they were installed, the hotfix ID number, and all of this. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to sort this. So where, curly bracket, and we're looking for the description. That will match. security, and close this out. Okay, and so this gives us this particular information here. So now we've got a listing of only the security updates. Now, what we're going to do now is, if we come back here, let's take a look at help. And we can see that we're going to specify the computer name, and notice that this also will allow me to use a credential. So this means that I can use this commandlet directly against a remote computer, and I do not have to use Invoke command if I don't want to. So I could say computer name and DC3, and I can specify my credential as $credential. Wait for it a little bit, and then eventually it should come back, and we should have a listing of our hotfixes. There we go. So there's all the hotfixes that are in this. And now, if I'm wanting to analyze this, then it probably makes sense to store this into a variable. So I'm going to say $A is equal to this. Okay, so now I could say $A. Well, let's just go back to our previous command over here, where we were looking at only the security updates. So I could pipe this to $A and just use the same command. And so now we found all the security updates. Now what I'm going to do is I want to sort these by installed on. And so now we've got them sorted out, and so that we found this. Now let's send this to getMember for a second. And getMember has an alias of GM. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm wanting to find out about this value here, installed on. And installed on says it is a script property. We've got install date, which says it is a string, and installed by is also a string. So as we're looking at this, yeah, I was hoping that one of these might actually be a date-time object. So sort on. So now let's take a look at, we'll run the command again. And so we can use this to be able to filter this thing out. Now let's just suppose that we're interested in this particular update. Right there. Then one of the things we can do, scroll back up here. It's hotfix ID is the property. It's equal to, and I can close this. And so this found this one specific security update. Now, let's go back and look at our help on get hotfix again. And notice that there is an ID, and it will accept an array of strings. So what we're going to do now is we're going to test get hotfix on my local computer. It doesn't have this hotfix on my local computer. So let's see if it's on DC1. And we'll do our credentials. It is on DC1, but it's not on my Windows 7 machine, but it is on these two servers. And we could test it to see if it's on SQL 1 or not as well. We could put computer name accepts an array. So we could say, hey, is it on DC1 and DC3 if we wanted to. we could read my text file and go off and check all of those to find out which machines has this particular hotfix or not, and to do that. So this makes it really easy, really convenient for us to be able to work with hotfixes on these remote computers. So let's go back up here to the slide deck for a second. That's working with hotfixes. The next thing we could do is we can work with WMyEvents. Now, there is registered WMyEvent, which will allow me to register events that can be on a local machine or a remote machine. We can specify credentials if it is a remote computer if we need to. Then we use getEvent to retrieve the event after it has been done. We use unregister event and remove event to get rid of these. So working with these classes or these commandments makes it really easy for us to be able to identify and to respond to events as they happen on the computer. And so I'm going to share back out my PowerShell console, but I'm going to share my whole desktop, and then I'm going to register some events and create an event. This is something that becomes very powerful, and typically I do this stuff in a script. I don't necessarily do these kinds of things just from a PowerShell console, but we can, and it can be pretty cool. So I'm going to share out my desktop. Now, let me give you an example of why you might want to do this. Suppose you're running a script and you need to start a process on a remote machine, and so you're waiting for that process to start. Well, on some computers it may take a second or two, and on other computers it might take 15 or 20 seconds for this process to start. Well, you can pause the script and wait for the process to start and then do your next stuff, or you can create an event and then you just simply wait until that process starts. And so that's what I'm going to demonstrate here on this remote local computer. But I'm going to start my console. Well, actually, let's just do it here. And so I'm going to register a WMyEvent, and I'm going to use an intrinsic class. Now, this class is means that this WMI class knows how to do events. That's all it does. It knows how to do events. And so I'm going to use the Win32_process start trace. There's also a process stop trace class, and this will allow you to find out when a process starts or when a process stops. And go specify a source identifier. And this is just something, whatever you want to make up. So I'm going to call this my event. And then I press enter. Yeah, I was afraid of that. And so what this means is that a normal user does not have the rights to create a WMI event. That's why I started to start this as an admin. I thought, well, we'll just kind of wait and see. So I'm going to highlight this, and then I'm going to start my PowerShell console as an administrator. That's also why I shared out my entire desktop, by the way. So administrator, and okay, so now I've started this, and trying to this down a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to set my location back to the C drive and paste this, and get back over here and delete this part of the command. There, so now I've got my command back, and press enter. My event, E-V-E-N-T. Okay, so now we've registered an event, so now I'm going to start Notepad. And you can see that Notepad started. Close that. And now I'm going to get the event. So I can just say get event, and then I specify the source identifier, which is my event. Now I know I created that event, so okay. So I misspelled it when I specified the source identifier. So EVET, okay, because it was like on the end of the line there. So then this says it doesn't exist because I already got the event when I used get event. Now, once we do this, then if we say get event, then MyEvent. There we go. So there it is. So this retrieves the event. Notice that we also got the event when I just say get event without specifying an identifier. So what this lets me know then is that this event occurred at 2:42 with 49 seconds on 3/16. And this is in my particular time zone. Now, what we also have here are source event arguments and the source args. Now, we don't know what those are yet because we're not seeing those. So I'm going to store this in a variable, and then I'm going to say $A dot source args. And so then we can see that we had the scope, the options, and the new event was this particular base object. And so I could type in the query, not showing up there. What about scope? It's not showing up there either. I'm thinking that might be an array. Yeah, must be an array. So our source arguments are there, and then we can expand these or we can look at these. The other thing that we have is also we've got the source event args, and then this is new event. And this tells me the process name, which was Notepad. It also lets me know the process ID, as well as the security identifier of the person that started this particular event. And so we've got a lot of decent information, the parent process ID. So we have a lot of information here that we can get from the source event args. One of the things you can actually do is create a new event, and then when you store this information here, then pick up the process ID, and then that would allow you to manage that process to do other things that you may need to know or you may want to know about that. So that's kind of working with events. The next slide is actually talking about working with hardware inventory. I'm not going to pop back over there. I'm going to close this back out. And when working with hardware inventory, typically we're going to be looking at using WMI, at least in PowerShell 2 and at least on Windows 7 or before. When you get to Windows 8, we have a number of commandlets that are the SIM commandlets that will allow you to get this type of information directly. But for right now, we're going to use get WMI object. And if I'm interested in the BIOS, I can say 132_BIOS. And that gives me information about the BIOS. If I want to look at information about my disk drives, I can use volume. And that pulls up information about the volume. Now, if I don't know what classes that I have, then I could just use list. Now, the nice thing here is that I can use wildcards. So I can say processor. And this will allow me to look for all WMI classes that contain the word processor inside it, the class name. And while this isn't a perfect way to find classes, it does help you do pretty well. And so we can see that we've got 132 processor. So I can come back here and just right-click and pull that information out. Now, this command allows me to work remotely as well. So I could type this as DC1, and I can specify credentials. And this will go off, and it will query this remote machine and pull this information back in for me. And so this works out to be pretty powerful because I can easily put a number of these commands. So this gets my volume, the BIOS, the processor. I could get memory, video, all kinds of stuff. And I could do this against a local machine, or I could do it against a remote machine. And when I work with a remote machine, I can use alternate credentials. So this is a very powerful technique to be able to work with that. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is actually something that's actually kind of cool, and this is installing software. And I'm going to do this on my local computer, but I could do this exact same thing on a remote computer as well. Now, I'm going to do this because I'm going to be installing software that I probably need elevated rights. And so I'm going to start PowerShell back up with admin rights. And so I've got this here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this software. Now these commands are a little convoluted, and so typically what I would do with these is I would have these inside a script itself. And but I'm going to try to type these out. Hopefully I'll be able to get it right. So I'm going to say WMyClass, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to a specific class, which is root SymV2, and then I'm going to be using Win32_product. And so that's the WMyClass I'm going to use, and I'm going to call the install method. And this install is actually going to come from a UNC share. And so that should be there. Now I need to come back over here and close my parentheses. And this is in my slide deck. So WMyClass, this is the Win32 product, is the WMyClass name that I'm using. I'm calling the install method, and I'm passing it a path to a share where I have the hello world.msi. And so this should actually come back, and it should come back relatively quick, assuming that I typed it correctly. Oh, you whiner. Can't convert root to SymV2 Win32 product to a system management class. There we go. Okay. And at this point, I use the whack when I have a computer name in front, and this time I decide I'm doing it local. So at this time, the hello world icon showed up on my desktop. I double-click it, and it says hello world. Yeah, so it's not like real exciting or anything. Now, what I need to do is to uninstall this software. And to uninstall the software, then I actually have to have 3 pieces of information. And those 3 pieces of information are the class key and the name and the version of the software. And that's information that typically you're not necessarily going to know. So if I use WMy, so get WMy object, Win32_product, and so what we're going to do is we're going to try this, filter this out to where we're going to look for the name is equal to hello world, and close that. And this actually takes just a little bit of time to run. There's an article on the Hey Scripting Guy blog where we talked about this, and it takes a little bit of time to run on this computer. But yeah, we can see that we got it back. And so what we have now is the information that we need. And so I'm going to put these, so I'm going to say $ID is equal to this value right here. And actually, I'm not going to do that either. So this pulls out my my class. And at this point, then I can actually put this into parentheses, and I could say uninstall. And close this. And so this calls this particular method. Now, because this is only returning a single instance of this object, then the uninstall method should be there, and I should be able to uninstall the product. And it goes back, the return value is 0, and we got rid of it. Okay? So that is kind of working a little bit with this, and we'll go back to our slide deck. And when we come back to the slide deck, so that was the events and the hardware inventory, working with software. So learning resources, got the Hey Scripting Guy blog. We got a number of articles there, PowerShell quizzes on the Learn PowerShell page. The scripting games begin on April the 2nd, and that is something that you would be a really, really good chance for you to learn and to work with Windows PowerShell. So let's take a look at some of the questions that we got here. Okay, does stop computer harm the system if a user is logged on to a remote computer? Oh, is it going to harm the system? If somebody's logged on to the remote computer, typically what it's going to do is it will let them know that you're going to shut down the system. You could specify a timeout value. There's also force, which will do a dirty shutdown, if you will. And so anyway. So that is so that's where you could use that. So you can do a polite shutdown to allow people time to save their work and to get off, or you can do a forced shutdown, which is something that you might need to do if the electricity is getting ready to turn off or something. So start and stop service that allow computer name, and then you show us how to use Invoke command. I used another method that I found online. Can you explain how this one works? Oh, that's just using get service, blah, 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 computer name, force, stop service. Oh, okay, so that's cool. So that's using stop service and then an input object that you relate to an actual remote computer. That's cool. I've never seen that. That's actually pretty neat. So, yeah, that's using stop service, and then the input object is an object, a service object that is actually built on a remote machine, a remote computer, and then that's what you use it to shut it down with. That's cute. I like that. Why would this first command work but not the second one? Get service bits on the server versus invoke command server 1, get service bits. Well, the first one here is you're connecting to a machine, and you're running get service on that. And then the second one, that's computer name server 1, that should actually work. That second command should work as well, assuming that PowerShell remoting is turned on. How can I enable remote service for PowerShell? Is there any command that gives a list of all the patches in comparison with different machines? Okay, I just showed you get hotfix, which will list the updates that are on machines, and I also showed you how get update or get hotfix does allow for credentials and connecting to remote machines, and so that would work. Now you talk about enabling remote service. If you're wanting to enable PowerShell remoting, then you use enable-ps remoting. and that will enable it on the machine. You can also use group policy to do that. If you're talking about the ability to use like get service or get process on a remote machine, then you're going to have to open up some holes in the firewall, and actually in some cases you need to actually start some services. I wrote a script for the Windows 7 Resource Kit where I talked about doing that, and I did it. The port number to open in the firewall for WinRM to work, you can define which port number you want to use. When you enable PS remoting, by using enable-PS remoting, it will automatically make changes in the firewall for you so that you don't have to do that. But you can specify a particular port when you configure WinRM, or you can just allow it to use it automatically. Ops Manager uses VBScript to collect data on services. They change it to PowerShell. I don't know. I don't do that much with Ops Manager. Would Notepad fail to start if somebody wasn't logged on? That is entirely a possibility, Paul. I hadn't even thought about that. So that's a really good idea. When the demo failed on Invoke command with Notepad, what output did I expect to give it? What could be the reason? Local firewall? No. I think it's because nobody's logged on to those remote machines, and Notepad is a user mode application. The output should have came back and let me know that it was starting the process, and as well as the process ID. One of the books that I've written is, in fact, the most recent one is Windows PowerShell 2.0 Best Practices. It's published by MS Press. Are there remoting changes in PowerShell 3? Well, yeah, of course, PowerShell 3 hasn't shipped, and Windows 8 hasn't shipped, and things are in beta, so things could change. But one of the changes right now is that on the server side, so like Windows 8, server, PowerShell remoting is already turned on. You still have to use enable PS remoting to turn it on the client. But on the server side, it's automatically turned on. So that's one thing. So remoting just works, if you will, to use Jeffrey Snover's phrase, when you're working with server side. Thanks for the great presentations. I'm glad you enjoyed them, John. Thank you for the kudos. This is inside thank you for attending AM. Click on the recording to show clauses, blah, blah, blah. Do you need to reply? Make sure that you can get the information in the future. I'm not sure what all that's about. Sorry. Running into credential connections when attempting to rename a remote machine via WMI and PowerShell. Curious how you would rename a remote machine. There are issues in using WMI. The 132_computer system class has a rename computer or has a rename method, but there's issues with using that when the computer is already connected to a domain. So if it's not connected to a domain, it's pretty easy, but when it is connected to a domain, there are issues with that. Typically the times when I rename computers, I'm using add computer, and I did an article a couple weeks ago about this, and add computer in PowerShell 3 already has the ability to rename the computer, so I can add it to the domain and rename it all at the same time. How many users can connect remotely via PowerShell? I'm not aware of that. I think it's more of a resource limitation. How would you work with SharePoint Management Shell remotely without having the SharePoint snap-in available to your local computer? I'm not familiar with that familiar with SharePoint remote management. Obviously, you could use RDP. You can use I would use PowerShell remoting though. So I would use enter remote PowerShell session, and then I would import the modules and the snap-ins from there. When that's happening, I have a basic connection to a remote machine. Tome, who's a PowerShell MVP in New York City, did a guest Hey Scripting Guy blog article for me. last year, I think, where he was talking about using SharePoint with PowerShell remoting. So check those articles out because he obviously knows more about SharePoint than I did. How do you discover what values I can provide to properties like item type that are available? One thing is to provide something that's wrong, and then look at the error message, and the error message will tell you what item type I can use. That's typically the way that I actually do it. Thank you, Ed, and say hello to the scripting box. Vern, I will definitely do that. Thank you. Does Get 132 WMyObject product get installed products cause issues? I've heard that. Yes. That's what I was referring to. Mark Adam Carter, who's the president of the Corpus Christi PowerShell Users Group, wrote a guest scripting guide blog article for me. And in this, he talked about using 132 product causes the MSI installer to re-enumerate stuff. That's one reason it's kind of slow. And that support article is still valid on that. So yeah, there can be issues with this. The other thing is 132 product only gives things that were installed with an MSI package. So in my demo, it works fine. But packages that are installed with other ways or methodologies, it's not going to enumerate them. I did I think a scripting guy article where I talked about going through the registry to list all of the installed software. That's actually a much more accurate thing. And the email we get after attending this webinar, thank you for there's a defective link. Oh, okay, I got you. So that's something that Marty should be able to address perhaps. And with that, that is basically it. So I have a number of contacts. You can contact me through the blog or on Twitter or on the forum or at scripter@microsoft.com. And Q&A, and then we go to the survey. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Ed. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to remind you that if you'd like to print a PDF of the slides from the presentation deck, you can do so by clicking Control-P. You can either print or save those locally for your convenience. Handouts are available for today's PowerPoint deck. To download the handouts, click the handouts in the upper toolbar in the right-hand corner of the client. What you should be seeing now in your slide area is a survey. If you could please take a moment to fill that out before you log off. We do appreciate any feedback you leave for us. All you need to do is follow the links provided to complete the evaluation. And with that, I'd like to extend a special thanks to Ed Wilson for today's presentation. Thank you all for joining us today. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of today's conference.